some people, they're stress eaters, they're emotional eaters, but other people, they get stressed, can't eat, stomach gets really cramped and tight. That's a sign that your vagal tone has dropped. And as soon as that vagus nerve, which is the leader of your parasympathetic nervous system controlling all of your internal organs, when that vagal tone drops, which is kind of like the baseline nerve impulse from that vagus nerve, the next thing that happens is gut permeability increases.
If you haven't done so already, go ahead and click that subscribe button down below. It's a little red button. You punch that, and it's going to notify you every time we put out a new episode that can help you improve your bone health. And then also, if you haven't done so already, head over to bonecoach.com, sign up for the free 7-day osteoporosis kickstart. That's going to walk you through everything you need to be doing right now to get on the path to improvement and stronger bones. After you do those two things, go ahead and press play on this episode, and I'll see you inside. Welcome to this episode of the BoneCoach Show. Joining us today to explore gut health and its connection to your bones and general well-being is Dr. Vincent Pedre. Dr. Vincent Pedre is the medical director of Pedre Integrative Health and founder of Dr. Pedre Wellness, CEO, founder of Happy Gut Life LLC, has worked as a nutraceutical consultant and spokesperson for Nature MD, and is a functional medicine certified practitioner with a concierge practice in New York City since 2004. He believes the gut is the gateway to excellent wellness. His newest book, The Gut Smart Protocol, featuring a 14-day personalized gut healing plan based on the Gut Smart quiz, is the culmination of years of research and clinical experience as a functional gut health expert. Dr. Pedre, it is great to have you here. Great to see you again.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
I am too. And I want to make sure you've just put out, we just touched on it in your bio, but you've just put out this amazing book, the Gut Smart Protocol. I want to make sure we talk about this and get to this. But before we do that, maybe we could start out with, you are a leader in this field of gut health. How did you even develop a passion for gut health, and what led you on this path to becoming a leader in the field?
Man, it's kind of one of those accidental journeys that was under my nose the whole time, but it really wasn't the way I thought my life was going to go. I mean, I knew I wanted to become a doctor ever since my earliest memory was actually sitting at a doctor's office with my mom. And mind you, so I'm 7 years old, sitting at the doctor's office, scared, can I say shitless? Scared shitless, because I really hated the doctor. Like any 7-year-old boy might hate the doctor. And even with that fear that I had and how much I hated going to see the doctor, I turned up to my mom and I looked at her and I said, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. And I remember that day, and I have no idea what was it that inspired me. My dad wasn't a doctor. My grandfather was a doctor, but I never met him because he never left Cuba. So he was stuck on the other side. And so I never really got to know him. So there was no model in my family. No one else is a doctor. And it's almost like there was this inner knowing. So I knew I wanted to help people. I knew I loved science. I was always good in science and math. But what I didn't know that I would actually then become a gut health expert. And yet it was the bane of my existence as a child: stomach aches, constipation, abdominal pain. I just remember probably the most common remedies my mom used had to do with my tummy. And then get into my teenage years, and I started, you go to the pediatrician with an infection, they give you an antibiotic. I go back to the pediatrician with another infection later on in the same year, another antibiotic. So over and over and over. And actually a little bit scary to think this, because this is the 80s, my parents would take me to the clinic, and a lot of times I wouldn't even respond to the antibiotic. And they would inject me with what they call gamma globulin shot, or pooled globulins, immune globulins from blood donors. And every time I got that gamma globulin shot, I felt better almost within hours, like immediately. And it should have been a clue to the doctors that something was going on with my immune system, that I needed other people's immunoglobulins to finally fight off an infection, that even the antibiotics weren't helping. And it all had to do with my gut. So I was on 20 plus rounds of antibiotics as a child, and it completely messed up my gut. I became sensitive to the top food groups in my diet, which were wheat and dairy. That includes gluten with wheat. And I developed food sensitivities to other things. I had mental fog. I had eczema that would break out. I had sores that would break out in my mouth, lots of fatigue. And I just kind of worked through it, got through college, got through medical school, kept pushing myself. I had this incredible ability to push myself past my own limits. And then as a doctor working 100-hour weeks and thinking that I was just tired because I was a student or I was a doctor. And you put in so many hours, you're working overnight shifts. Little did I know that the pizza that I was having and the soda and the dairy were all zapping my body of energy, because they were just fueling the fire of inflammation in my gut and just keeping me in with a leaky gut and affecting the way my immune system was functioning. And it wasn't until I discovered functional medicine, which was way after I had already was an MD, had done my residency training, that I was able to unravel the story of what had happened to me. And by then, I had already decided that I was going to be a holistic integrative doctor. That was my passion. That's what I wanted to do. I had discovered yoga, meditation, breath work before medical school back in 1995. If you can think back to that time, it wasn't popular then. It was not mainstream. But for me, I was searching for a number of things, but partly for the solution for the internal angst and the very type A hyper-wired person that I was on the inside. And I didn't want to be that anymore. And I discovered breathwork and meditation as the remedy for that. And I started to rewire my brain before I started medical school. And so I knew I was going to be this integrative doctor. I had no idea that I was going to become so passionate about gut health, because it was just something kind of that I had learned to live with. And probably I'm sure there are people listening that have gut issues that they just have learned to ignore. They don't take you down. You can still get to work. You can still function. You can still parent your children. But sometimes you're running to the bathroom. Sometimes you're bloated. Sometimes your stomach is upset. But you just kind of live with it. And that was me. I was this doctor thinking, I'm not going to take antidepressants. I'm not going to take antispasmodics. I'm not going to take medications for diarrhea. I'm just going to live with it. But then not understanding and thinking there's got to be something that's going on in the background. And then when I discovered functional medicine and realized, whoa, like I was on 20 plus rounds of antibiotics. It destroyed my gut microbiome. I have leaky gut. I've got dysbiosis. I've got to fix this. And wait, this is reversible? I thought this was my life sentence. And 20 plus years in, I find out that this is reversible through natural means, by changing my diet, by incorporating probiotics, by eating the right types of foods that are going to rebalance my gut microbiome, taking nutrients to reverse leaky gut. And it just led me down the rabbit hole of curiosity. And I just became really curious about the patients that were coming in with gut health issues. So it wasn't like I was trying to become a gut health expert. I was just really curious. And every time I saw a patient with gut health issues, and it was never just gut health, it was irritable bowel syndrome and allergies, or IBS, irritable bowel, and migraines, or it was eczema. There was always a constellation of things going on in the patient. And I just became a really keen observer and started implementing the things I was learning in functional medicine. And then like a kid, you're watching a science experiment and your patients suddenly start getting better through ways that you didn't even learn in medical school. And that caught my attention. Not only was I patient zero and worked on myself, when you start seeing this stuff work on your patients, and then they come in and they would tell me that a symptom that they never even told me they have improved by healing their gut, or that their allergies are gone, their asthma's gone, that their hives are gone, that their eczema improved, then it my attention was fixed. And I was like, this is it. This is where I want to focus. And that was the impetus for writing my first book, Happy Gut. And once I made that decision, I was like, I'm going to become a gut health expert because this is my story and this is the way I want to help people.
Hey, it's Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. I want to take one more minute to talk about if you are somebody who was newly diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis, and you're at a point where you're stressed, you're worried, you're overwhelmed, you have no idea where to start or how to get started getting confident in your plan. Or maybe something has been proposed as an option that you're not ready to go down yet, right? You want to try to do everything you possibly can naturally before considering that as an option. Or if you're the person who has been on this journey for a while, you've tried to figure all these things out on your own when it comes to osteoporosis, but you're still losing bone. If either of those situations is where you're at right now, I want to tell you about the Stronger Bone Solution Program. Over 5,000 people have come through the Stronger Bone Solution Program, and it walks you through the exact process you need to fill in the missing pieces, uncover critical things in your plan that you may not be aware of, and help you make modifications, adjustments, and tweaks to get you to the place where you're building stronger bones. That's what this program can do for you. And it's run for years and helped many, many people. And I want you to be able to benefit from this program as well. So if you're not confident and you're waking up every single day worried about fracture, wondering how am I going to improve my bone health today? I don't want you to be in that position. I want you to get confident in your plan so that you can focus on living life and enjoying the life that you deserve with the people you love most. So if that's where you want to be, head over to bonecoach.com/apply and apply for our Stronger Bone Solution Program right now. I'm Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. I want to see you inside this program. I want to help you get on the path to improvement and stronger bones. So go over, submit your application. If we approve your application and it's free to apply, then we'll let you know the next steps to get started in one of those programs. So hope to see you inside very soon. Let's get back to the episode. That's so empowering. And I think it's very relatable. Other than going on to become a gut health expert and a functional medicine, doctor, I think a lot of that is very relatable for many people. When I see people talk about their gut, oftentimes, I see them, they just point to the area surrounding their navel, but we know it's so much more than just a small area. Can maybe you walk through the totality of the gut? What all is included in it?
I mean, you've got to think that the gut starts in your mouth because digestion starts in the mouth and then triggers a whole cascade that then gets stomach acid to be secreted, goes down the esophagus as you're chewing your food. Most people don't chew their food well enough. So already the food is arriving in a state that's harder to digest. And then from the stomach to the small intestine, large intestine, until you poop it out, it's going through these chambers that are changing the environment so that the food can be processed in the best way possible to extract the nutrients that are needed in order for us to live, and also in order to feed our microbiome as well. Because we are these super organisms that can't live on our own. We require this incredible invisible world inside of us that we call the microbiome, which is also outside. It's on our skin, it's in our mouths, in our airways, vaginal canal. But the biggest reservoir is inside the digestive system, and particularly in the large intestine. So it's this incredibly complex ecosystem that really, when I went to medical school, we looked at the gut as like the least sexy, the least exciting organ system. Like the heart, you can think like, wow, it's like pumping blood through your body. The lungs, they're keeping you alive because they're breathing. But then you look at the gut and you're thinking, well, I mean, it creates crap, it smells bad, and you know, you can get an ulcer, you can get like inflammatory bowel disease, but what else, why else is it important? We underestimated, and I think they don't teach enough about the importance of the gut in relation to the rest of the body in medical school. I think that's changing now, but it really was, when I was in my training at Mount Sinai here in New York, I had the chief of gastroenterology join our team for a week, and he was observing us present and all that. And at the end of the week, he came up to me and he said, if you ever are interested in becoming a gastroenterologist, reach out to me. And this is Mount Sinai, which is one of the top most prestigious programs in gastroenterology. And I was looking at him and thinking inside of myself, yeah, nah, I'm not going to deal with poop. And look where I am. I'm dealing with poop.
Yeah, and I mean, you do a great job, especially outlining for people how to get a healthier gut and healthier stools and all those things too, especially in your most recent work. And I know a lot of people, when they think about their gut health, they realize that absorbing their nutrients is important. But what other areas of our health are influenced by our gut health?
So many things. Our skin, our brain, our airway, our immune system, our energy, metabolism, and also very importantly, our joints and our bones.
And maybe let's expand on just the connection between gut health and bone health if we can. I think that's
Yeah,
very
it's
relevant
actually
for our audience.
it's something that we're learning more and more about recently. And honestly, the science is still evolving, but understanding the there are certain bacteria in the gut microbiome that influence calcium absorption. And there's certain favorable bacteria like lactobacilli that can help improve calcium absorption, which, as you know, is very important for bone building and bone remodeling. So that's one aspect of it, is in a preventive aspect. If your gut is disordered, if you've got dysbiosis, if you have the wrong bacteria in there, you don't have enough of these good bacteria, you're not going to absorb calcium well enough. Then the second aspect of it is understanding that bones and joints are an active metabolic tissue that is just as susceptible to inflammation as any other part of the body. And the makeup of the gut microbiome is going to influence inflammation in other parts of the body, because the gut is command central for our immune system, and the immune system is the control center for inflammation all over the body. But since the gut is command central with 70 to 80% of the immune system all along the gut lining, it's reading what's happening along that gut lining, and that's getting translated into signals that reach the rest of the body. So if your body is filled with inflammatory signals because you have leaky gut, and now you're not absorbing calcium well, maybe you're not breaking down your nutrients properly, and then on top of that, you've got inflammation that's going to affect your joints, but it's also going to affect bone formation and the ability to retain strong bones.
And this is such for everybody listening, this is such an important part of all of this. Dr. Pedre is touching on the immune system's connection to your gut health and your bone health. 70% of your immune system in the gut. These cells that are responsible for the immune system are white blood cells. Your cells that break down bone are a form of white blood cells. So anything talking to or stimulating the immune system is speaking the same language as the cells that break down your bones. So yeah, this is such an important piece that I think a lot of people miss. It's not just about, am I absorbing the nutrients? It's, Is your gut the source of inflammation contributing to bone breakdown in the body too?
Yeah, your gut is basically regulating the state of alert of your body. Now, obviously, there are other things that could affect the state of alert, like chronic infections, mold exposure, but even mold exposure affects the gut. A chronic infection like Lyme can affect the gut as well. So the gut becomes kind of the central player in basically every inflammatory process that's happening in the body. You know, find me a person that has a chronic degenerative disease, and I will challenge you to not be able to find leaky gut associated with it.
How do you find leaky gut? How does somebody know if they have a leaky gut?
Well, there are certain data points that we can use to figure out if someone has leaky gut. And I kind of use a more of a qualitative measure by having people take the quiz in my book, the Gut Smart quiz. And the higher your score, the more severe your gut issues are. So I divide, you get a score from 25 to 450, but that score is also divided into mild, moderate, or severe categories. So the higher your score, the more severe your gut issues are, the more likely you've got leaky gut. If you're severe or moderate, you have leaky gut. There are other ways that you can work with a functional medicine provider to figure out if you've got signs of leaky gut. Some of them are more helpful than others, and they're all kind of like circumstantial evidence. So you can look, for example, for zonulin in a stool test. And zonulin is a molecule, it's a protein that controls gut permeability. So presumptively, if you're detecting high levels of zonulin in the stool, the person has leaky gut, you're assuming they're producing too much zonulin, that's going to lead to increased intestinal permeability. Obviously, you're always putting this together with other data points and the story of the person in front of you. And the reason I created my quiz is that I found that after doing so many years of testing, I pretty much knew from the patient's story whether they had leaky gut or not. Now, there are other ways that you can test for it as well. You can look at anti-zonulin antibodies in the blood. You can also look at antibodies to what we call the cytoskeletal proteins. They're like the scaffolding that hold up the cells, but also create the interconnections between the cells that we call tight junctions. So you can look at things like anti-actin antibodies, anti-vinculin antibodies. So they're antibodies that can develop to different cytoskeletal structures that tell you that leaky gut might be present. You can also find antibodies to lipopolysaccharide, LPS, and that's actually a protein produced by, or it's not a protein, it's a lipopolysaccharide. So it's a sugar fat molecule that's produced by gram-negative gut bacteria. And if it gets into your system, it's a huge trigger for your immune response and actually becomes the risk factor for obesity, for diabetes, for metabolic disturbances. So you can look at all these things in a blood test. There are also leaky gut tests. You can look at a lactulose mannitol urine test ratio. I did that test for a while, found that it wasn't that accurate, that you might get a negative test, but you still have a person that you know has leaky gut. And I think it's also only good for detecting leaky gut in the small intestine, not the large intestine. So I find it to be less reliable. I like looking at the antibody test or even circumstantial evidence, a person who's reacting to a lot of different foods on a food sensitivity profile also presumptively has leaky gut because you won't develop food sensitivities, IgG reactions, immunoglobulin IgG, unless you have leaky gut. So the diagnosis for me is based a lot on history. And then I use the data points to confirm what I've seen and also as ways to come to when people are working one-on-one with me to show them, because I think data then creates higher compliance.
I want to make sure we link to this. We're going to link to this Gut Smart quiz. I think everybody should be taking that as well. So I'm going to link to that in the show notes. Maybe we can talk about too, what are the biggest things that you see or find that are contributing to leaky gut?
Oh, the huge one is antibiotics. And antibiotics are either overprescribed. The CDC data says that up to 30 to 40% of prescribed antibiotics are unnecessary. The rates are higher for Hispanics and for African Americans. They tend to be prescribed antibiotics more often. And antibiotics are just a huge gut disruptor. They're going to disrupt your good flora as well as whatever bad bugs are in your body. So, for anyone, just to contextualize this, I'm not saying I'm anti-antibiotics. I'm anti the overuse of antibiotics. And I'm anti the use of antibiotics without the judicious restoration of the gut, because every time you put somebody on an antibiotic, you're causing a problem, and that problem needs to be corrected. Now, go worldwide or just cross the border to Mexico, and you can get antibiotics by walking up to the pharmacy, and you don't need a prescription. So antibiotics are being overused worldwide, and we're seeing antibiotic-resistant strains of different bacteria in Southeast Asia and other parts of the world because there's no regulation of who gets an antibiotic. A lot of times people are taking antibiotics for a cold. That's a huge one, but there are actually other reasons that people are developing gut disruption or leaky gut. The second most prescribed medication worldwide is a PPI, proton pump inhibitor. It's used for people who suffer from acid reflux. And you think, well, it fixes the problem. I take the PPI, I feel better, I can eat anything, I can go out, I have a steak with my friends, have a drink, have my glass of red wine, and it doesn't bother me anymore. But you've just changed the internal environment of the stomach. And by doing that, you're not just changing the stomach, you're tipping the first domino in the digestive tract that then is going to have a downstream effect on the makeup of the microbiome in other parts of the gut, including increasing your risk for yeast overgrowth. It actually, PPIs increase the risk for community-acquired pneumonia. It increases the risk for C. diff diarrhea, which is a horrible colitis that people can get that can even lead to losing a part of your colon. And it causes all sorts of mineral malabsorption problems, calcium. It can lead to osteoporosis. But from the leaky gut perspective, it's disrupting a very delicate ecosystem that then leads to leaky gut. Other over-the-counter medications that people might take just for pain, for joint aches, for muscle aches, ibuprofen causes leaky gut. Acetaminophen, same thing. Some of them are direct effects, like ibuprofen increases the permeability of the gut, whereas acetaminophen causes a disruption in the gut microbiome. And when you disrupt the gut microbiome, you cause a dysbiosis, then that leads to leaky gut because our gut barrier is actually in this state of homeostasis with the good bacteria that live on the other side of the border. When you lose those good bacteria, you're losing the bacteria that are actually helping to maintain the integrity of that border. So other things that do this that are big gut disruptors, alcohol, processed foods that are full of omega-6 inflammatory oils. Those are also going to increase gut permeability. And sugar, because sugar causes dysbiosis. So again, by direct and indirect effects. And the last one, which I think is a huge problem, I usually call it the elephant in the room because it's kind of the last thing that people deal with. And the thing that they're not thinking about because they're thinking about, okay, what do I eat? What type of exercise should I do? But they're still stressed out. And stress is like an attack on the gut, and stress causes an alteration in gut permeability. You know this if when you've been really stressed and you lose your appetite, you can't eat, or food just sits like a rock in your stomach. Some people, they're stress eaters, they're emotional eaters, but other people, they get stressed, can't eat, stomach gets really cramped and tight. That's a sign that your vagal tone has dropped. And as soon as that vagus nerve, which is the leader of your parasympathetic nervous system, controlling all of your internal organs, When that vagal nerve, when that vagal tone drops, which is kind of like the baseline nerve impulse from that vagus nerve, the next thing that happens is gut permeability increases. So gut permeability is under the control locally by an intracellular chemical signal called zonulin, but it's also under control globally by impulses from the vagus nerve.
So how do we improve vagal tone?
Lots of great ways. So many great ways. Cold plunges, even just cold, like ice cold water on the face and the neck. There are cold receptors on the face and neck. I talk about this actually in my book, bunch of ways that you can improve vagal tone, because when you improve vagal tone, you improve digestion, you improved absorption, you put yourself in a state. So basically you're putting your body in a state where you're telling your body that it's safe. And when your body is feeling safe, then your body can heal itself. The other thing is breath work, meditation, but also breath work with humming, with vibrations, singing, chanting, because the vagus nerve runs right here along the vocal cords. So these are all, you have your own resonant like instrument here that is an incredible healing machine. And one of the things it can do is you can activate the vagus nerve with it. You can take really deep diaphragmatic breaths. I teach people how to do deep diaphragmatic breathing in my book. And also actually through the book, there's a QR code that takes you to the website where you can watch a lot of these recordings on breathwork and meditations from the book. I teamed up with breathwork and meditation teachers and even a worldwide Qigong master. And we've got all of that on the website. It's in the book, but it's also on the website because I know some people are more kinesthetic learners. They need to be walked through. And so you do these things and you can reactivate your vagus nerve. And one of the big points in my book, obviously when we're talking about gut health, everybody wants to know what to take. Should I take a probiotic or not? What foods should I eat? What are the best foods for the gut? But a big point that I make is that this type of self-care, stress management, is a non-negotiable when it comes to your gut. And consequently, it's also the top of a downstream domino that will improve your health if you kick it into gear.
Amazing. And I know you mentioned your book here. I've got it with me, and I've read this book, and it's an amazing resource. And what I really like and appreciate about this is that it's different, and that it's actually got some recipes in it too. So it's going through, and it's not just giving you a list of foods. If you're on YouTube, you can see this. If you're on the podcast, hop over to YouTube, you can see it. But like, there are some beautiful recipes in here that have very specific foods that I'm sure were very carefully curated, but like, these look like great recipes. I'm actually going to try some of these out. So maybe can you talk about how did you decide which foods go in these recipes, and how did you develop that?
Worked with a clinical nutritionist, looked at food lists that have been put out by Monash University, the FODMAP list, all that, but also worked with a Summerbach fermentationist to understand where do ferments fall depending on your gut type, mild, moderate, or severe. Worked with a clinical nutritionist, figuring out what foods should be in certain categories. What can you tolerate when you're mild that you can't tolerate when you're moderate? Or what can you only tolerate if you've got severe gut issues? It took a lot of thinking and a lot of going back and forth to refine these food lists. And then I teamed up with someone who is, I consider her my soul sister. It's crazy. We met soon after I published my first book, and she lives on the other side of the world. Her name is Lee Holmes. She's a chef and clinical nutritionist, and she's had 5 best-selling cookbooks in Australia, all related to the gut. And so I wanted to have, we came up with an idea for foods that would have an international flair. So if you look at the recipes, like there's elements of cuisine from a lot of different parts of the world. There's spices from different parts of the world. I wanted this book to be accessible to anyone, anywhere, and also recipes that were easy to make. And so we teamed up and we came up with a list of recipes, and we actually divided them according to categories: severe, moderate, and mild. And interestingly, someone asked me this the other day. They're like, why are there more severe recipes and not as many moderate and less mild? And it's because as you move through categories, and typically what I would have a person do is take the Gut Smart quiz, find out what your starting point is, then you follow the plan. Now you're also doing the mindset work, the breath work, meditation, all that. So you're addressing all aspects of it. And at the end of the 14 days, you retest yourself. And say you started at severe and you go to moderate. Well, now you can eat all of the severe category foods and recipes. And now you can add the moderate. So that's why they're more severe is the most limited category. So I wanted to give more recipe options for severe, because a moderate and a mild can eat everything that's in the severe category. So it kind of like, as you move down the categories, you actually acquire more and more things that you can incorporate into the diet and test out. But I wanted to make sure that the person who falls under the severe category doesn't feel like, oh, I can only eat 5 things. I wanted to show them that there was a lot of variety and then incorporate that. And some of the recipes are adaptable between categories. Like I tell people how you can take a moderate and make it a mild recipe. Like if you want to add a little more spice to the kimchi or whatever it is. But that's basically how it came together, and really was a dream of mine to create this diet protocol based on a quiz, a vision that I had. God, I first thought about this 2 years after I published my first book, and just thinking about what I was seeing with patients and how people, you can't have a one size fits all when it comes to gut health. And the majority of books out there are one size fits all for gut health. And so I wanted to come in and bring a solution for those people who tell me, well, I did this plan and it didn't work for me and I didn't feel good. And then I'm like, okay, because we got to figure out what your gut type is. And then depending on your gut type, then we know what you can eat. Because your diet, if you're severe, can't be the same as a moderate and can't be the same as a mild.
This is I'm encouraging anybody to get this book. I'm going to make sure I link to this in the show notes. And maybe before we wrap up here, Dr. Pedre, I would love to even just, I want to make sure we don't go through all the foods, because I know you've got a lot of amazing stuff in this book that people should check out. But maybe, do you have a couple of foods that you think are really helpful, like that you've seen? Maybe, I know everybody's uniquely different, and different foods are going to work for different peoples, but are there some that you see universally that can be beneficial for most people?
Yeah. I have so many opinions on this, and even an evolving opinion of what is the best diet for gut health. And also understanding, and there's a whole chapter on environmental impacts on gut health, to help people understand that it's not just the foods, it's how the foods were grown, it's the pesticides in the food, it's what the animal that you ate has been fed. All of this is affecting your internal ecosystem, which then consequently affects how you feel in your body. But part of the research I did for this book, I went to Africa and I spent time with the Hadza, the hunter-gatherers, one of the last hunter-gatherers on the planet. And it's like going back in time in a human time capsule, because they're not eating all the foods that we eat out west. And yet someone had the incredible idea of testing their gut microbiome and looking at their gut bacteria. And they have an incredibly diverse gut microbiome with very interesting differences because they're hunter-gatherers. So, and it's not unique to them, because there's studies where they've looked at other hunter-gatherers or pre-agricultural groups in Africa, and they found similarities. And I bring this up because their diet is basically root vegetables, forage berries, wild honey, and when I say honey, it's not like drinking nice honey that's been like pulled out. They're having honeybees and honeycomb all together. They don't separate it. They'll eat everything. And these are tiny honeybees in Africa. And small to medium-sized animals, and baobab fruit, which is really high in fiber. So baobab tree is the one, if you think of the Lion King, it's that very quintessential tree from Africa that's really big trunk and then branches out like this that you see on the Lion King that produces the baobab fruit. Very high in fiber, very nutritious. So their fiber intake is 40 to 50 grams per day. Whereas the typical American is having 10, 15 grams in a day, and that's below the recommended amount of fiber. Now, there are studies that have looked at what happens when you increase fiber intake or what happens when you increase fermented food intake. And both of these things are going to improve gut health in different ways. But interestingly, fermented foods, in one study that I quote in the book that was done at Stanford University, fermented foods had the greatest impact on microbial diversity, which is, again, the holy grail.
Hey, it's Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Bone Coach Show. If you're finding it helpful, please leave a positive rating and review. Hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast or the channel. That lets us help more people and reach and serve more people. And it also lets us know that this is helpful to you on your journey to better health and stronger bones. And then also, right down in the show notes, you can actually find a link to my free Bone Healthy Recipes Guide. That's going to give you access to some amazing and delicious recipes to support your journey to stronger bones. And then also, we have a link to my free Stronger Bones Masterclass in the show notes too. And that is the 3-step process that has helped people in over 1,500 cities around the world get confident in their plan for stronger bones. Over 110,000 people have taken part in this, and it's been really, really helpful for them. And I want you to have free access to it too. So add your name and email right down there in the show notes, get access to that free Stronger Bones Masterclass, and let's get you confident in your Stronger Bones plan today.
And just to circle back to the Hadza, aside from the fact they're this human time capsule, why are they so special? Well, they don't have diabetes. They don't have heart disease. They don't have cancer. They don't have dementia. They don't have obesity. So they don't have a lot of the modern diseases that we've become accustomed to in Western society. So you have to ask, okay, well, what is different? The diet's different. Microbial diversity is different. They've never been exposed to antibiotics. And they're also being exposed to the natural world, to the wild. And I think that's a really important missing element in microbial diversity for us urbanized population, is that people don't get out in nature enough. We need to get exposed to nature. We need to be out in dirt. Obviously you don't want to get exposed to dirt that has pesticides in it, but getting out to parts of nature that haven't been sprayed with pesticides is very important part of diversifying the microbiome, along with incorporating things like fermented foods and increasing fiber intake. You're not going to go wrong with increasing fiber intake. They actually did a study that was published after my book came out. It's a 4-week study. They had people increase their fiber intake and their fermented foods and their grains, along with eating wholesome meats. And they used that, that was the intervention arm versus a just general dietary guidance, but avoid processed foods, sugars. So basically a control group versus a high fiber, high fermented foods group. And they tested their stress scores before and after. The group that dropped their stress score the most was the group on the intervention with the high fiber, high fermented foods diet, 32% versus 17% drop in stress score. With diet alone, there was no mental health therapy being done. And out of those that dropped their stress score, so just think everybody who's out there who's stressed, that you could drop your stress score just by changing your diet, not by doing any mindset stuff. Imagine if you do diet and then you add breath work, meditation, stress management, exercise, all those things. And what they found was that the people who were most compliant with the dietary intervention had the greatest drop in their stress score. So they could map the stress score. The more you kept to the diet, the greater the drop in the stress score. Now, the reason, just going back to the quiz, it's great to add fiber, it's great to add fermented foods, but if you're in the severe category, you're not going to be able to do all that just yet. So you've got to start by knowing what is your gut type. We know what the ideal is. We know what we're striving for. We know we want to create that microbial diversity, but we've got to meet the person where they're at. And we can't introduce something like fermented foods, which, by the way, in that Stanford study, lowered 19 inflammatory markers by eating more fermented foods. So every day I'm incorporating sauerkraut. Actually, last night I made my own homemade sauerkraut that I'm letting ferment for the next couple of days. And I incorporate yogurt. If it's not dairy, for me, it's coconut yogurt. But I'm always rotating in the pickles, the fermented foods, making sure that I'm getting those things into my diet because I know that's part of the ideal and that it's going to lower inflammation in my body. And that's, as we circle back to the beginning with bone health, the bones are particularly sensitive to inflammation. And anything you can do if you want to keep your bones healthy and strong, you've got to lower your inflammation. And one of the things that I teach in my book is you can do it through diet, through the right types of nutrients. But now adding an extra angle to it, it's how do you do it by taking care of your gut and gut microbiome so that it improves that gut interface, lowers leaky gut, and by consequence, lowers inflammation and immune activation in your body.
This has been a fascinating conversation, Dr. Pedre. I just want to thank you so much for sharing this knowledge and all your hard work with the GutSmart protocol with our audience and our listeners. I want to make sure they know exactly where to find you, and then I want to make sure we link to those resources in the show notes. So could you tell everybody where they can find you at?
Well, they can, I'm always posting on Instagram, so they can look me up at Dr. Pedre. I put a ton of free content there meant to inspire, educate, and edutain people to, make positive behavior changes in their life that can improve their health. And if they go to gutsmartprotocol.com, they can learn more about me, about the book. Actually, on the webpage, they can take the quiz. They can go to the website and take the quiz and find out what their GutSmart score is and what their gut type is. And that becomes the beginning of their journey to healing their gut and beyond, everything that's connected with the gut.
Amazing. So I'm going to link to those resources in the show notes. And for everyone listening, you can find all the resources, show notes, everything mentioned here today over at bonecoach.com/Dr. Vincent Pedre, GutSmart Protocol. We'll see you in the next episode. Hey, it's Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. Hope you found that episode helpful and that you enjoyed it. Just one last reminder, if you haven't done so already, head over to bonecoach.com, sign up for your free 7-day osteoporosis kickstart. It's going to tell you everything you need to do to start getting on the path to improvement. Hope you found this helpful. I'm your Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. I'll see you soon.